prayer. Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity to be here in this place and at this time to learn your word. Open our eyes to what you would teach us and help us to discuss it in a way that we can all benefit. We ask this in the name of Jesus, your Son. Amen.
Amen.
Now, all of you should have a background paper that explains who Nehemiah is. Now, to begin, what's going on here is the back prior to this Nehemiah coming on the scene, there was a how do I want to put this? There was a battle around Jerusalem. They had had these things going on and off, and usually you were able to buy off the opposing army by giving them stuff, and they'd
How
leave.
many times was Jerusalem conquered?
Just this once. You know, in as far as we're concerned. Now, the Romans also got them later on, so that made two. But what happened here was this time the Babylonians didn't leave. And in those days they would you know, have walled cities and they would try to hold out. And the way in, this is what always used to amaze me. Jerry Kennard was always in our Bible study. He was a very high IQ guy, and he said, you know, in every case, the way you go into the walled city is through the water system, because you got to have water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there usually was some sort of you know, some sort of bars or something there, but that was the way you went in, and that's the way they went in. They took all of the people that they wanted back to Babylon, all the craftspeople, all the teachers, all of those kinds of folks. And they just left everybody else just kind of fending for themselves, and they laid waste to the city. So the city was sacked, all the stuff in the temple was gone. They pretty much wiped out most of the buildings. The walls were a mess. They tore the gates down. So that's what you had. You had a city that looked like it got hit by the two hurricanes. You know, so all it was there was a pile of rubble and a few other things. Now in 539, now remember that's happened in 587. In 539, which is about 45 years later, Cyrus of Persia conquers the Babylonians. If you remember the term handwriting on the wall, well, as it turns out, Daniel read the handwriting on the wall that foretold this was going to happen. So Cyrus takes over, and he had no beef with the Jews at all. So he allowed the Jews to return home. And a large contingent got to Jerusalem, saw the mess that they had, and they repaired the foundation for the temple, but never completed it. So all that was there was just the bottom part. Then the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, those, you know, everybody knows where those books are, right? Well, Zechariah is right before Malachi, so it's the second last book. See, this is what's interesting about the Bible. These two guys are in the back, but they relate to Nehemiah, which is farther up front. So that's the way they organized it. The reason for that is because Haggai and Zechariah were considered minor prophets. They were put in the back of the bus.
So they weren't the big deals.
Yeah,
they weren't the major ones. They weren't the major ones.
Yeah, so you know, exhorted the people to complete the temple. It was done in 520 BC, but that was the only building that was actually fixed up. Now, no work was done to repair the walls or any other infrastructure, so it was still a mess. So anybody who wanted to harass them could just walk in and do it. Ezra the priest returned to Jerusalem with another contingent in 458 BC, and he had an entirely different purpose, which we'll study later. He wasn't interested in building anything. He was interested in making sure that the people who were there wouldn't forget their heritage and wouldn't forget their faith and all that sort of thing. That's what he was known for. Now Nehemiah shows up in the court of Artaxerxes, that's how you pronounce that, there'll be a spelling test later, who ruled from 465 to 424 BC. So in other words, this, if you look at the timeline, it's been almost 100 years since the Jews were allowed to return home, and the city is still a mess. In 445 BC, Nehemiah was given authority to go to Jerusalem and take charge and rebuild the walls. So that's where this book begins, with that scenario, that, you know, Nehemiah is in another place, he hears about what's going on and decides to take action. Now the authorship of the book, wasn't really a standalone book in the beginning. It was part of one long book that gave us 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah. That's why they're all in order. The author of this book was believed to be Ezra, who wanted to show God's blessing sustained to his covenant and his people. Now, the reason that 1st and 2nd Chronicles are there, 2nd Chronicles explains how they got conquered and taken away. So now Ezra and Nehemiah say, oh, now we're back and look, everything's fine. So that was the theory. Now, when we read this, you're going to find that there's a lot of personal references in the book of Nehemiah. He writes it in first person. So there's no way Ezra could have written that unless he had either a transcript from Nehemiah somehow, or had a copy of Nehemiah's diary. So that is what we're going to be reading today, is how all of this began, and why a person like Nehemiah, who had it going for him where he was at.
Was he like a minister or anything, or he was just?
Well, we'll get to that. He was a member of the court, but not in the place you might think. Okay. And the preparation, you know, so there's the structure of the book. We're going to be starting out with the preparation to reconstruct the wall, then how they did it, then renewal of the covenant, which Ezra had something to do with, and then finally the obedience to the covenant. So basically this book is two parts: how they rebuilt the city and how they rebuilt the faith of the people who were living in it. Alright? So, we know now that Nehemiah is in the court of King Artaxerxes, that's how you pronounce it, this is where the whole thing begins. So, would somebody like to read all of chapter 1 for me, please?
Want me to start?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You have a brave soul. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanai, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Then I said, Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you turn to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. They are your servants and your people whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man.
One more sentence.
I was cupbearer to the king?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now you asked what he was. That's what he was. Now you ask yourself, what does a cupbearer of the king really do?
Is he really a servant?
What's that?
Is he really a servant?
A high level one, but he has a very, very important purpose.
I have
Those
it-
of us who are Italians know what the cupbearer of the king does.
I have it described down here.
Mhm.
One of the cupbearer's duties was to choose and taste the king's wine and make certain that it was not poisoned.
That's what a cupbearer does. You know, all the dons had food tasters to make sure that nobody was poisoning you. That's why we Italians know this stuff. But the reality of it was, this is what this guy did. So he basically was a highly ranking person in the court, probably dressed pretty well, probably had a nice place to live, you know, in the palace grounds someplace. So basically, he's sort of in the inner circle for that reason. So everybody sees him carrying these cups around after he's tasted them, and he hands them to the king and so on. So keep this in mind, that he's not a minister or a baron or anything like that. He's just somebody that happens to be close to the king in a different way. Now, all of you who were in Bible studies before, he mentions that he was in the citadel of Susa.
Susa.
Who else that we studied lived in the citadel of Susa? We haven't studied that many people. That's where Esther and
Esther, I was
Mordecai.
thinking Esther, but then I thought, no, that's probably not.
That's where Esther and Mordecai were from. So, if you remember the map from last time, that is hundreds of miles away from where Jerusalem is. And so, in order to travel that, he needed a lot of help. So, that's where chapter 2 comes in. In chapter 2, Nehemiah is going to is thinking about doing something about this situation. And it's how he goes about it that is very interesting. So, would somebody like to read chapter 2, verses 1 to 10?
I'll read it. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Xerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before, so the king asked me, "Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill?" This could be nothing but sadness of heart. I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" The king said to me, "What is it you want?" Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my fathers are buried, so that I can rebuild it." Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, "How long will your journey take, and when will you get back?" It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, "If it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah? And may I have a letter to," how do you pronounce it? Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my request. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Amorite official heard about this, they were very much
talk about planning ahead. Think about this. You know, how much work do you think he did in advance before this event? I mean, he pretty much knew what he needed, didn't he? I mean, who else would say, what do you want? Well, I don't want to feel miserable, but what I want is ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. He had a whole list of things that he needed already prepared. So maybe all that prayer, motivated him to do that. So stop and think. The first thing he does is he gets a letter for safe conduct. Then, what is the king that he gives the letter to give him?
Safe passage through the forest.
And what, something else?
Timber.
No, the other guy gave him the timber.
It says here the king had also sent army officers and cavalry.
So not only does he have safe passage, but he has a military escort to take him all the way there. Now, the timber is the second part that's very, very important here. Where would you find timber in Palestine? You wouldn't. all the timber had to come from somewhere else.
Because isn't it real flat there or something? Yeah.
I mean, all of the timber in Jesus' day came from Lebanon. That's why the charitable organization is called the Cedars of Lebanon. So he knew he needed wood, and he didn't have any. So he had the good sense to say, "Oh, give me a letter for this other guy. He's got wood." So imagine what he's got going here. He's not riding by himself. He's got these trains full of timbers. He's got a cavalry. Probably a whole lot of people cooking food and everything else going along the way. So this is quite a, shall we say, parade by the time he gets to where he's going. Okay, now, like I said, most of us would never think of half of what he asked for until it was too late. Most of us would have gotten there and said, "Oh, I need wood." He knew in advance what he needed. And why is that so surprising? How many times had Nehemiah been to Jerusalem? Never. He was never there. Yet he knew exactly what he needed.
He's a good contractor.
Yeah, yeah, but still, he had never seen the place, so so he's pretty much going based on what he was motivated to do by prayer, and what his brothers had told him. Remember in the beginning, he was talking to his brother who relayed the whole situation to him. So here is the first lesson is the power of prayer. These two chapters talk about prayer to God. I mean, in the first chapter, you read the whole thing.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. So he's trying to tell us that prayer matters even in situations like this, which is what we're going to find is a theme throughout the book of Nehemiah. It's not just it's not just a Habitat for Humanity type of thing. There is other things going on here. Now, the situation, as I said, is this entire entourage shows up. Now remember, there have been people living there for a while, but everything else is like rubble in the streets and everything. Probably wouldn't have looked a whole lot different than Berlin did after World War II. There were people living there, but there was probably still bricks in the streets and who knows what else. So basically he's coming back to a people that have no idea who he is other than his brothers, with all kinds of other folks they don't know what's going on. Imagine if you're living there and you see this army coming at you, what would be your first feeling?
Being invaded.
Yeah, you're being invaded. Because up to now, since it was just a pile of nothing, nobody cared. Now there's people there, you see. So once he gets there, and Becky's right, he was a good
He
contractor.
was.
So let's read chapter 2, verses 11 to 20.
I'll read it if there's not any names.
Before we do that, can you explain to me the names of the months?
Oh, that I will get you next time. Basically, the first month, that's the Jewish calendar, and I have to look that up online. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. It's not based on what 12 months like we would be. It's a lunar calendar, and they all have different names. That's why Easter keeps moving. Because the Jewish calendar and our calendar are not based on the same parameters. Easter is always the first Sunday after the first full moon in the spring. Because that's the way the Jewish calendar works. It's lunar. Ours is pretty much standard. So depending on when the first full moon falls, that's when Easter's going to be.
First full moon after the 22nd of March
Yeah.
is actually what it is. So, not, you could, but if you had 2 full moons in March, it would be the one after March 22nd.
As I said, after the first
After the 22nd of March.
first full moon in the spring, which is March 22nd.
Grandpa had it memorized.
I was asking,
Yeah.
why, since Jews don't believe in Jesus, why are we following the Jewish calendar to determine where Easter falls?
I don't know.
Because it's connected to Passover.
That's true.
Yeah, but that's their holiday, not ours.
Yeah, I
Ours
know,
is
but
close to theirs.
But the story is that it goes from Passover to Holy Week, in Holy Week.
And Jesus was
And-
crucified around Passover time.
Yeah, exactly, that's the reason. Also, remember, Passover is where the sacrament of Holy Communion came from. They were eating the Passover meal. So that's why it's connected.
And there is that guy on TV now that he's Jewish and he believes in Jesus.
Hmm.
He got excommunicated from his family because of it.
Hmm.
Because he believed in Jesus, because they're not allowed to.
Well, there is a group called Jews for Jesus.
Yeah, that's what, I forget his name.
Yeah.
He's on TV on every day.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of them, and they've been around for a long
Yeah,
time.
he's on every day, but I heard his story, and his family basically
Hmm.
wouldn't have nothing to do with him, and all his people wouldn't have anything to do with him because he did that, and I mean, they hate him and everything because of it. But he's on TV every single day. I forget
Right.
his name, but he's on every day.
Right, and if you want something even more dramatic, find somebody who is Muslim and converts to Christianity. I mean, they're afraid of their lives from their own family. Anyway,
Yeah, I'll read the next one.
11 to 20.
Okay, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. By night I went out through the valley gate toward the jackal well, and the dung gate.
Yeah, that's the name of it.
Sounds gross. Examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up by the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king had said to me. They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began the good work. But when Sanballat, the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Gershom the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. "What is this you are doing?" they asked. "Are you rebelling against the king?" I answered them by saying, "The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding, but as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it."
So, so he's roaming around at night, he says, with a few men. Now notice he mentions there was only one mount, which means,
I thought he had a group of people with him.
he did, but there's only one mount, which means he's on a horse, the rest of them are walking.
Oh, okay, I see.
So, I don't think he has revealed yet what he intends to do. At least that's what it says. So here's this guy from who knows where, all of a sudden taking charge and let's take a walk and do this and do that. Now to give you an idea, and we'll be using these, hopefully there's enough here later on. Basically, this is what the map of Jerusalem looks like, or looked like at the time. Now, you have to understand that, most cities in those days had several gates. You couldn't just have one. So there are gates back there. Am I short one?
Brian, did you get one?
I just
I can share hers.
No,
no, he's got another one.
he's got one. Just-
Yes, send Brian one.
So if you look at it, you'll notice that, you see there's, the wall system is not something simple. It's pretty large. Remember, the Jerusalem at the time of Passover and stuff would have more than 200,000 people inside. So you're talking about a pretty substantial wall, not quite the wall of China, but pretty long, and that's why it took them so long to get in and out of whatever area he was in. And you'll see that there are the gates that are mentioned there. The gate of Ephraim, the sheep gate was one that he mentioned. There's a horse gate. There's an offal gate. There's you can see the fountain gate that led to a see where on the inside there's the pool of Siloam.
I don't see the dome gate.
I don't see it either. I guess they chose not to use that name. But the pool of
You just wanted to
Siloam.
see it, right?
Anybody remember the story of the pool of Siloam? Why is that so important to us? That's where the blind man was. And he went there every day. And they took the mud, Jesus took the mud out of the pool of Siloam, and that's how he, cured him. So a lot of these things that are referred to in the Bible go back hundreds of years in this city. So you've got notice there's also that big dark line that goes through around Herod's palace. The reason it goes through Herod's palace is because Herod's palace wasn't there yet. But you can see how it starts from the pool of Siloam, goes past the Essene gate, goes up around Herod's palace, and heads toward the temple. That's the extent of work that Nehemiah and the people are going to be doing. And you say, well, that's nice. Well, the thing is, there's no craftsmen among them, other than who happened to be there. They didn't bring in anybody that knew anything about this, so they had to learn on their own. The other thing, keep in mind, is that all of these gates had these humongous wood structures. They couldn't just be this high, because otherwise you couldn't keep armies out. So all that timber he brought with him was going to be going onto every one of those gates that you see there. And I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them that I can find. So you've got 7 gates, all that timber. You got to hold it together with something. I don't think they're going to use nails. I mean, basically, if you remember, those gates had cross pieces on them, and you had to, connect the ones going this way with the cross piece going across. And then when you got them done, you had another problem. somebody had to stand them up in order to, you know, hook up the hinges and do all these other things. And you had to have the wall ready. So all of this work is going to be done by a bunch of people that really didn't know they were going to do this until he showed up. Now, if you remember, it said, they replied, so let's start rebuilding. So they began this good work. So here's Nehemiah saying, oh great, this is wonderful. I got all these workers now. What problem do you think he had next? He had to organize them. One of the hardest things I did when I managed the Habitat for Humanity thing is I had to figure out how to help the construction guys organize everything on a Saturday morning, because you had no idea who was going to show up, what skills they had, where the house was, construction-wise. You would not believe how many times we had high school kids rake the front lawn, because that was the only thing they could do, you see. Also, we had issues where in the beginning there's a lot of stuff that people can do, but that as the house becomes more and more, it becomes more of a specialized thing. One of the things we had that held us up was we couldn't find anybody who could mud drywall. And all those houses were drywall, so we had to hire somebody, otherwise it was going to hold us back. But once we got the drywall up, we had all kinds of people who could paint. I mean, these are the kinds of things that, you know, that go unnoticed. You just can't take a group of people and say, all right, let's go build now. It doesn't work that way. So Nehemiah has this problem. And he's got to figure out how in the heck to handle it. How am I going to organize these people, and you got this part, and you got this part, and you six are going to do this, and so on and so forth. And then he's only one guy. So he's got to find some other people that he can trust to put in charge. So, chapter 3 at the beginning, the first 2 verses, I'm going to read those and explain why this is important. Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. Look at your map. You see the sheep gate is up towards the top, right above the temple there, right by the gate of Benjamin. The sheep gate was important to the priests because that gate was used to bring the sheep in that were going to be used as sacrifices in the temple. So this was their gate, okay? They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zakur, son of Imri, built next to them. So, why do you think it was important for the priests to be the first builders?
Temple, and they,
But what other relationship did they have to the people?
Had the most authority. They were the ones that told people what to do and how to do things, and oversaw a lot of things, sacrifices and everything.
So that is what Nehemiah was thinking of. His logic was, if I can get the people who are at the top of the pyramid to go first, then no one else will have an excuse to say, we can't do that. I mean, here's a bunch of priests who don't know a whole lot about building, did this. So now he says, well, now I got these other 2 groups, and notice you will find that he names them by name. So what's happening is he is taking... he's looking at the groups of people, where they live and everything, and he's finding somebody, you know, that you might say was sort of like the leader or person in charge, and saying, okay, I want you to take your family and the people who live around here, and I want you to rebuild this section. Okay, and so that the rest of this chapter is kind of like that. For example, verse 3 says, the fish gate was rebuilt by the sons of Hassanah. They laid its beams and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakaz, repaired the next section. Next to him, Mesullam, son of Berechiah, son of Meshezabel, made repairs, and next to him, Zadok, son of Baana, also made repairs. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under the supervisors. So he's going along, and he's saying, all right, you folks live here. Across the street's the wall. So you guys repair that. You know, you don't have to walk very far. One of the things that they had to do, though, is they had to get plumb lines. Any of you ever use Dave, you ever use a plumb line? Mm-hmm. Basically, they had to make sure that when they piled these stones up, that they were flat. Otherwise, you know, a good wind or something would knock them over again. So they had to teach these people how to use a plumb line and how to, you know, use the, what do you call it, the plumb itself.
Just the plumb.
Yeah. So you got the plumb on the one end, and then they stretch out the line itself, which shows you the flat line. And they had to teach these people how to use these things. So again, this is the rest of that chapter goes through who's doing what.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about what they had to do to build the gates. What's the rest of the wall? Bill? Oh.
Okay. As it happens, and I'm gonna have to, I tried to make a copy of this, but it didn't work. You'll see why in a minute. They have actually excavated a part, pass this around, they have actually excavated a part of what the wall looked like. And it's all stones.
Stones.
And you see how it goes up?
Yeah.
That's why the plumb line was necessary, because they basically built it so it looked like an arena, if you will. And also it allowed soldiers to climb up there and, you know, man the walls in case anybody, you know, attacked them or something.
They didn't have cement in those days, what did they use, mud?
Yeah, and
Mud,
Palestine was good for mud.
mud, they use mud.
Yeah, they had no choice. They used mud and whatever else they used, you know, straw. Remember they made bricks out of straw, so there was.
And they said the 5 aristocrats wouldn't help because they didn't believe in hard labor.
Yeah, okay. Notice he points that out.
And how they could
Might not have been
mud.
pleased with them not helping.
Was that?
Maybe they weren't pleased that they wouldn't help, but they refused to help.
Yeah, but like I say, notice he notes that.
Yeah, they wouldn't
There's
help.
a message there.
They wouldn't help.
Hey, folks.
I got another question.
Mhm.
On 2 places it shows Christ's tomb with a question.
Right.
What's that all about?
Today, if you go to that area, there is a, I don't know what you call it, a grotto or something like it, that is supposed to be Christ's tomb. The Catholic Church sort of oversees it. At one point, not too long ago, the person who was in charge was a former Chicago fireman who became a priest, and he's over there doing it. What happened is the Roman Empire was split into 2. You had the empire in Rome, and you had the empire in what we call today Istanbul. The Roman Western Empire fell, but the Eastern Empire, you know, stuck around. And then when Constantine became emperor, Constantine converted to Christianity. And so did Constantine's mother. And Constantine's mother got the idea that all the historic places around Jerusalem need to be identified in their locations. that happens to be the one that they said was where the tomb was. Is it? We don't know for sure, but that's where it is. And if you physically go there, you can go down in there, and they'll actually have I forget what it actually has down there, but basically there is a symbol, supposedly, there's a symbol of where Christ was born. You actually have a star there, you know, and there's a symbol where the tomb was supposed to have been. But that is how they found them. Constantine's mother insisted that they go back and they look at, for all of the things that you see there, you know, where was Gethsemane, for instance, and where was, you'll notice a lot of the other things on there, where Calvary was, and notice Calvary's on there twice.
Well, that's what he's saying.
It's not, they are not sure where it actually was, but I can tell you, there is one there now. And that's the one that Constantine decided that, you know, mother decided, well, this is where it's gonna be. I said so. But it's physically there. I mean, you can go to it, and but the point of the matter is that they weren't exactly sure. They're still not exactly sure today. I mean, obviously they knew at the time. But the other thing that happened, you asked how many times Jerusalem was conquered. There was one other time, and that was in AD 70, when the Jews rebelled against the Romans, and the Romans just came and laid waste to the place. Which was interesting because Herod had built that temple, and it was gorgeous. And the Romans laid waste to it anyway. In fact, there was a movie called Masada. Any of you watched that? Masada is still there. Masada is a mesa. You know what a mesa is, right? You know, it's a flat piece on top of what would be a mountain. Masada was the summer palace of King Herod at one time. But what made Masada interesting was the only way you could get up there was with a basket. You had to, you know, it was like an elevator. There was no way, there was no road or anything that went up there. So during this revolt, a lot of the, when Jerusalem fell, all these people got up on Masada and cut the road. So they were up there all by themselves. They obviously had to bring enough food and water up there. And the Romans, they didn't know what to do. I mean, they tried hurling stuff at them, you know, with catapults, and it didn't do any good. So they ended up building this bridge. Took them over a year to build it. That was going to go all the way up to the top. And finally, when they got up there, what do you think they found?
Weren't they all dead?
They were all dead.
Yeah, they were all dead. They all committed suicide. But because of that, a lot of the landmarks got lost. And we're talking, Constantine's mother was in 400 AD. That's 400 years after these events occurred. So, but like I said, you can go there, and there is a caretaker, and he is part of the Catholic Church, and he'll show you everything. Now, whether these things with all the other stuff going on in the Middle East, whether somebody's going to send a rocket at it or not, I have no idea. But the star is in Bethlehem, or where Bethlehem was. I think it's still a city. And again, they're not exactly sure whether that was the spot, but Constantine's mother said it was. Now, scholars are saying they probably weren't, Jesus probably wasn't born in a stable per se. He was born in the cave next to it. But, no one's sure of that, but you gotta go where the star is. I mean, it's, we human beings decide where things happen. It's the last line of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Everybody remember what the last line was? When the legend is better than the truth, print the legend. So that is why it's in two places. But next time I will get you a list of what the months are and when they are. All I can tell you is the month that we read was sometime around what we would call April. But again, it's a lunar calendar and it's totally different than what we
I
have.
don't really need a list of it, it's just that I wanted to know why they were called what they were called.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah,
That
that's,
explains it.
yeah, anyway, why don't we gotta get ready for, we just gotta set up and everything. Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity to hear about Nehemiah and some of the wonderful things he was able to do. Help us to listen to your call just as Nehemiah listened to his, and help us to do great things in your service. Amen.